Transferred from ADX Florence to USP Marion. What changed for the inmate? Smash that subscribe button. Hit like if you're ready for danger, and comment where you re-watching from. Because this story about a federal prison transfer is about to get dark, twisted, and intense. The isolation shift. The rain had been falling for hours, drumming against the steel of ADX Florence's towering walls like a warning. Inside cell block D, inmate Leonard Cross sat in near darkness, his eyes tracing the faint shadows cast by the security light above. 11 years in the most secure prison in America had stripped most men of hope, but Cross had learned to survive not by brute force, but by patience and observation. That night, the routine changed. The loudspeaker crackled in a way it never did during the late hours, a code word Cross recognized immediately. It wasn't a threat to his life, not directly. It was a signal. He was being transferred from ADX Florence to USP Marion. Cross had been moved before, shuffled between Supermax and federal facilities, each shift a reminder of who controlled the corridors. But this transfer was different. The notice came without explanation, without warning, and with no justification in the files. Even the warden's signature was missing. The uncertainty gnawed at him, but experience taught him that fear was a tool, if wielded carefully. Outside, the transport convoy waited in the fog, armored vehicles lined like silent sentinels. Federal officers moved with quiet precision, unaware that the inmate they were guarding had already calculated every possible route, every vulnerability, and every human factor in their plan. The air smelled of wet asphalt and diesel, mixing with the faint metallic tang of fear. Inside the prison, a minor incident distracted the guards. A routine security check revealed a missing mop from the janitor's closet, an item so insignificant it would normally be ignored. But Leonard noticed it, a small but telling sign. Someone inside ADX Florence had prepared the facility for his departure in ways the cameras wouldn't see. He had allies, unseen, within the system itself. As the convoy began the slow crawl through the Colorado mountains, Cross studied the faces around him. Officers chatted lightly, unaware of his inner calculations. Cross knew names, schedules, even family connections. One of the guards carried a lucky charm tucked inside his uniform, a detail Leonard would remember for later. Small details meant control, control meant survival. Then the first sign of disruption. A single tire burst with a muted pop, the vehicle rocking slightly as the convoy slowed. Officers scrambled, checking the remaining vehicles. Cross did nothing, but in his mind, he traced the exact trajectory this small malfunction would force them to take, a path more isolated, more vulnerable. At a roadside stop, a local mechanic arrived to assist with the vehicle. Leonard observed, noting every movement, every hesitation. The mechanic's hands shook slightly. Cross recognized fear in subtle body language. It meant influence could be applied without a word. By the time the convoy resumed, the environment had shifted. Leonard's presence was already changing the dynamics, though no one realized it. Hours later, as dusk fell, the convoy reached a desolate stretch near a river crossing. Leonard's eyes scanned the terrain, steep embankments, brush concealing observation points, a bridge with limited oversight. And then it happened. A minor roadblock had been placed ahead, a utility truck abandoned in the middle of the lane. It seemed coincidental, but Leonard knew better. Someone had prepared this, aligning the chaos with his plan. Officers exited the vehicles to investigate, radios crackling nervously. Leonard remained seated, calm, yet every nerve in his body alert. His mind ran simulations, predicting movements, anticipating reactions. The convoy had slowed, tension rising. Leonard could feel the balance of power shifting, subtle but undeniable. Inside his restraints, there was a hidden tool he had smuggled weeks before, a small, metal device capable of unlocking his handcuffs if used correctly. The key would come at the precise moment, when the chaos and distraction peaked. And Leonard was patient. He had already waited 11 years. As the night deepened, the officer's attention remained on the road, oblivious to the storm building inside the rear of the vehicle. Leonard's thoughts were precise: anticipate, observe, and act. Survival was not just a physical struggle, it was a mental one. He had learned that manipulating fear, timing, and perception could make walls irrelevant. Then the final sign came. A radio transmission, misdirected, revealed a federal supervisor's plan to reroute the convoy through an isolated maintenance yard. Leonard's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with opportunity. The transfer was no longer routine. It had become a stage set for him. And in that moment, he realized the truth. The move from ADX Florence to USP Marion wasn't punishment. It was a test. But who had orchestrated it, and why, remained a secret hidden in the shadows. And as the convoy veered toward the maintenance yard, Leonard's eyes flicked to a barely visible security camera. Someone was watching. But when the convoy doors opened, what Leonard saw waiting at the yard would change everything. Something he hadn't predicted, a presence that wasn't part of the plan, a hidden variable that threatened to upend everything he thought he controlled. If you think this story is intense, you're not ready for the next chapter. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The shadow inside USP Marion. By the time Leonard Cross stepped into USP Marion, the prison's walls loomed like silent sentinels, weathered and gray, under a cold, early morning mist. The high fences, razor wire glinting faintly in the pre-dawn light, seemed smaller than the mental challenges Cross had already faced, but he understood one immutable fact. Here, the game changed. ADX Florence had been designed to isolate, to break, to erase identity. USP Marion, however, thrived on manipulation, alliances, and leverage. One wrong step, one misread signal, and the environment itself could become a trap. The intake officers barely noticed him. Cross had learned to move in ways that made him invisible. Soft steps, neutral gaze, no unnecessary movements. Yet he felt the tension in the air immediately. This wasn't just a new facility. It was a labyrinth of unspoken rules, whispered power struggles, and invisible hierarchies. Every inmate, every officer, was a potential variable. Cross had been trained to see them all. In the first hour, a minor incident highlighted the precariousness of the environment. An inmate in the receiving wing dropped a tray of food, and a guard reacted sharply, shouting and flinging the tray across the hall. Other inmates flinched. Cross noted it mentally. Every reaction in this place had a ripple effect, and small displays of fear or anger could escalate unpredictably. In this system, awareness equaled survival, and Cross had it in spades. A few cells down, an inmate named Carl Henderson, notorious for his brief but brutal time in a federal facility in Texas, watched Cross with quiet intensity. Henderson had a reputation for being both observant and dangerous. He had orchestrated fights, manipulated alliances, and survived far longer than most expected. Henderson's gaze wasn't hostile yet. It was evaluating, measuring. Cross understood the silent language immediately. Curiosity, calculation, and a hint of suspicion. As the intake process continued, Cross noticed discrepancies. Official records had been slightly altered. One file indicated an earlier transfer date for a cellmate. Another listed a disciplinary action that never occurred. These minor inconsistencies were deliberate, a breadcrumb trail left for someone, or perhaps for him. It was unclear if the changes were mistakes or a signal from someone familiar with his history. The ambiguity itself was dangerous. By mid-afternoon, Cross was escorted to his new cell block. The corridors were narrower than ADX, with shadows pooling in corners, flickering under the cold fluorescent lighting. A distant clang of a metal door echoed throughout the hall. He noticed two guards conversing quietly, unaware he could hear every word. They mentioned an unaccounted package in the warehouse, a detail irrelevant to most, but a clue to Cross. Someone was testing the internal security, probing weaknesses. During the first day, Cross began observing patterns. Officers followed strict schedules, and inmates had subtle rhythms in their movements, from recreation periods to meal lines. He mapped it all mentally, noting who was distracted, who could be influenced, and who was untouchable. The environment was no longer about isolation, it was about influence, and Cross was already several moves ahead. Later that evening, a minor explosion rocked a distant part of the prison yard. Alarms blared, blue lights flashing across the high walls. The disturbance was quickly contained, but the message was clear. Chaos could erupt at any moment. Cross knew it was planned, a test of reactions. Whoever orchestrated it had access, knowledge, and patience. In the dining hall that night, he overheard a whispered conversation between two inmates. Names were exchanged, references to previous facilities made. Cross realized his presence was already a catalyst. People were moving, talking, and making decisions based on him without even knowing it. That was leverage. Then came the critical discovery. A janitor, cleaning near the back maintenance hall, accidentally left a metal door slightly ajar. Inside, a stack of files was visible, documents detailing guard schedules, security blind spots, and inmate records. Cross's heart raced. Whoever left these hadn't anticipated he would notice. It was a trail, but whose trail? He didn't know yet, but he understood its potential. As the night deepened, Cross sat in his cell, reviewing the day in his mind. USP Marion was different from ADX Florence. Here, control was subtle, not enforced. Alliances mattered, perception mattered, and power could be wielded without violence. For Cross, the transfer hadn't been a punishment. It had been a test, and he had passed the first round. But as he leaned back, listening to the distant hum of the prison, Cross realized the final variable hadn't revealed itself yet. Someone inside the facility knew more about him than they should, someone capable of predicting moves before they were made. And when he discovered the identity of that observer, it would change everything. Because in a prison like USP Marion, control wasn't about walls. It was about shadows, whispers, and the unseen hands moving everything from behind the curtain. And the shadow was already closing in. The web unraveled. Before we finish, smash that subscribe button, hit like if your pulse is racing, and comment where you re-watching from. Because the final chapter of this high-risk prison transfer is about to blow your mind. By the third day inside USP Marion, Leonard Cross had already begun to manipulate the environment without drawing a single direct line of suspicion. The files he discovered in the maintenance hall became his blueprint. Every guard rotation, every blind spot, every subtle vulnerability was now part of a web he could influence. The prison had become a chessboard, and he was several moves ahead. That afternoon, a small incident ignited the tension into action. A package, supposedly routine maintenance equipment, was intercepted mid-hallway by Henderson, the inmate who had been quietly observing Cross since intake. Henderson's eyes locked with Cross's across the crowded corridor. It was a silent acknowledgement, an understanding. They both knew the stakes. Henderson moved the package to a discreet location, just enough to alert authorities, but not enough to stop Cross's plan. Subtle cooperation had begun. Meanwhile, federal investigators led by Special Agent Daniel Reeves tracked the original transfer from ADX Florence. The logs revealed anomalies, a slight delay in convoy timestamps, minor miscommunications between officers, and a series of maintenance requests that made no operational sense. Cross's transfer was officially uneventful, but the breadcrumbs he had planted were already visible to those who knew where to look. Reeves realized quickly that Cross hadn't escaped physically. He had escaped influence-free. He was inside the system, bending it without ever breaking a law. That night, the first major confrontation occurred. A guard discovered a cell door unlocked. Not broken, not forced, just unlocked. Security footage revealed nothing. Cross had not been in the area. The unlocked door was an invisible message, a demonstration of his reach within the prison. Panic began to ripple through the ranks, and whispers of a ghost in the system spread among inmates and officers alike. Cross had more than subtlety on his side. He began influencing small groups of inmates to comply with minor tasks, moving packages, altering cleaning schedules, delaying roll calls, without them fully realizing their role in the larger plan. Each action strengthened his control, and with every shift, the balance of power subtly leaned toward him. By the second night, the prison itself had become an extension of his mind. The critical twist came when Cross intercepted a private communication between the warden and a federal oversight officer. The message contained directives for heightened surveillance in certain blocks, instructions for monitoring suspected contraband, and the names of officers considered reliable. Cross read it and memorized it word for word. Every precaution, every attempt at containment, was already anticipated and accounted for in his strategy. By the third evening, the tension escalated into a near crisis. Henderson guided Cross to an unused maintenance corridor near the rear wall. There, the files and subtle signals led to a hidden network of intercoms and cameras not listed in any official map. Cross could monitor activity across multiple blocks in real time, manipulating schedules and movements with almost surgical precision. The realization hit him. USP Marion, notorious for its rigid hierarchy and control, had been rendered pliable by observation, intellect, and subtle influence alone. Agent Reeves, tracking Cross's movements from the federal side, pieced together the evidence too late. Cameras showed nothing suspicious. Logs matched expectations. Officers remained unaware. Cross had become untouchable, not through brute force, but through mastery of perception, timing, and psychology. In the final hours, the true objective revealed itself. Cross didn't want to escape the prison physically. He wanted to establish dominance. By subtly controlling key operations, creating illusions of vulnerability, and demonstrating influence over both inmates and staff, he had reshaped the hierarchy of the prison entirely. The warden, investigators, and guards had all unknowingly participated in his strategy, each move reinforcing his power. As dawn broke over the high walls, Leonard Cross sat in his cell, observing the patterns he had created. USP Marion had become a stage, and he the unseen director. No alarms had sounded, no laws had been broken, yet the system itself had shifted under his influence. The most secure prison in America had been bent, not by violence, but by intellect, timing, and the invisible hand of manipulation. And then a note slipped under his cell door sealed the story. It was from Henderson. You're no longer just surviving. You're the measure now. Watch carefully. Everything is watching you. For Cross, the message was confirmation and challenge both. He had changed the prison, but the real game had just begun. I hope you learned from this. Make sure you try it out, and once you see any changes in outcome, come and drop your feedback in the comments section of this message. And if you do not get it, make sure you drop your questions inside the talk room of this channel. Also, if you found it helpful, make sure to react with your favorite emojis and drop your comments too. Stay tuned. Turn on your notifications for this channel as I would be dropping more helpful tips as soon as possible. You are highly welcome, Hugging Face.